So hello, good morning, everybody. Thanks for tuning in for our Climate Talk number 7 in this spring. Today, it's all about education. I called it Nourishing the Green Mind, and we really like to nourish the green minds from early age on. We are all about aware of the climate change problems, phenomena, developments, climate diplomacy. Everybody has a strong opinion, but most of us do have not real knowledge, or at least not 100% secured knowledge what it's all about. And often people lack a consistent lifestyle to change, even if they have a great awareness of climate change, to change their own lifestyles. Intellectually, for sure, we are all open and all aware, but how change could be implemented and early enough to make it not a very dire way to change and create a real great awareness. Climate affects us all, of course, and it should be a priority in education systems, as recalled in Article number 12 of the Paris Agreement, which emphasizes the importance of climate change education. Well, that's the theory, and paper is very patient. Today we have invited actually 3 experts, but we're still missing the third one. But 2 experts are already here. Thanks a lot for tuning in, Jerry, being located in the Czech Republic, and Shweta. She is with an organization based in London, but currently she is back home in India, where she was born. I know that you have prepared great PowerPoints. I looked at them. You have lots to talk about, so I'm not wasting our precious time on a long introduction. But I'd like to give you a short idea about what Jerry Kulik has been doing so far, and what's a little bit about his background. He is a biologist and teacher and director of the Center of Environmental Education and vice chairman of the Committee for Education and on the governmental board on sustainable development in his country. And he focuses a lot on teachers' education, methodological issues, so much more to say, lots of things. In 2004, he received a very prestigious award for his work in the field. And I've learned from his biography that he already started in 1989 working in the green field, which I think is really amazing. Shweta, thanks for tuning in as well. Great that the time change is not that difficult with India, but your organization is spreading out educational ideas from London. She is the co-founder and sustainability and education policy expert at Earth Warriors in London. Shweta grew up in India and is an education policy specialist who has worked with governments and multilateral organizations and civil societies in South Asia and Africa, and of course, Europe during the last 10 years. With her multicultural background and with her expertise, she's a perfect expert on policy and practical ideas for the classrooms. But first, I'd like to open the floor to Jerry. Thanks so much for joining us with your decades-long expertise. Jerry, do not tell us only about what concepts work best in your country, and I'm sure you have contact with neighboring countries, with your colleagues in Central Europe, and how do people react on this difficult topic on creating climate awareness, climate change from early age on, because normally it's all the academic background or like education started after age of 16, 18, and then sometimes it's too late to make it more natural. So the floor is open to you, Jiri. Share with us your experiences, your mission, and what you're working on. And I'm glad to learn that you're also in close contact with a new IJP project that is just rolling out since the beginning of the year.
Okay, thank you very much for invitation and for nice introduction. So I will do my best to share experience from Czech Republic and maybe a bit from Central Europe. And I will just share the presentation.
Thank you.
Can you see it now? No, not yet.
Not yet.
Not yet. Sorry. Just a second.
No worries. Yeah, there you go.
Now I think it works.
Wonderful.
So what I would like to speak about is, well, let's say new efforts, new developments in climate education in Czech Republic as the starting point for the discussion. And I must say, as it was mentioned, I am in the field of environmental education or sustainability education for a while. And for whole my professional life, climate is an issue for education. It is a new issue. So, but on the other hand, I see some new developments and some bigger stress on climate in the whole education, and maybe some signs of mainstreaming the issue into even school curricula. So that's what I will try to illustrate a bit. I work for a non-governmental organization, Environmental Education Center, and in Czech Republic we have a network of similar centers, and they are quite important actor of educational change in terms of sustainability and environment and newly climate education. And but there is network of actors beside these environmental centers or environmental education centers. There is some kind of structures and support in governmental bodies, starting from central government and going lower to regional governments. And there is also some let's say, there are some structures in schools. We have, for example, special position of teachers in schools. Not in all schools, it is not obligatory, but still we have structure of so-called coordinators on environmental education, and these are teachers who can support sustainability education and issues like educating about climate.
Jiri, just sorry for interrupting you once. When you said that, for what age group is normally addressed in schools?
Yes, well, these teachers who deal with sustainability and environmental education are appointed from kindergartens up to secondary schools, but the stress on climate education is upper primary and secondary. So let's say from age of students 11 till 18, 19. And so let's say in framework of this broader picture of sustainability education, environmental education, in last 3-4 years there was interesting development in working with climate as important issue of education. And what happened or what can illustrate this movement is that governmental board on sustainable development decided to prepare a white paper or guidelines for climate education. And what you see in this first slide is the title of this guidelines: Climate is Changing and What About Us? And it was, of course, inspired also by movement of young people, such as Fridays for Future, but also by some other impulses. So it's illustrated by this picture of secondary school students demonstrating for climate. And what was interesting and what illustrates the situation, this around this publication, there was quite a broad team of co-authors, and it was very mixed society. So there were people from organizations specialized in environmental education, global education, civics education, but there were, of course, also teachers. There were representatives of Ministry of Environment, of different scientific or academic workplaces. So there was, for example, climatologists, but also psychologists and psychotherapeutes. And what I want to illustrate is that one change is that this climate education isn't only effort of one isolated institutions, but there is a big shift to networking and to cooperating of different actors, not only within sectors like NGOs or schools, but across the sectors. And it can be illustrated not only by these guidelines, by this publication, but there is also new web page in Czech Republic. It's unfortunately only in Czech, of course. And this web page is named Učím o klimatu.cz, which means I teach about climate. Učím o klimatu, I teach about climate. And it's a common effort of several leading organizations in climate education in Czech Republic. And it's filled with lessons and methods and teaching tools which can be used in teaching about climate education.
Is that for free? The access?
The access is for free. Yeah. And it's new thing. So the publication was published a year ago in June 2021, and the web page was started in the autumn, in fall, and it's still quite at the beginning. Most of the material still will be added to it, but it's open access. Yeah, it's free. And just going a bit further into the content or into the approaches we use and which are illustrated by the publication. There are some arguments why climate education is important. I won't read it. You can see it on the slide. But the main idea is that we are facing the need of big social transformation, and if we should succeed in this social transformation, we need to make also big transformation of education system. So that's of course the idea. And of course, we react on what's happening in the whole world in climate education. And so the result of this work of this group attached to governmental board on sustainable development, to this work on climate education guidelines, is that it includes recommendations, but it also describes the content of climate education or the methodological approaches. And last but not the least, it also supports teachers with a list of available programs and materials they can use, or teachers and other educators, because it is not only for formal school system.
Jiri, sorry for interrupting you again. How do parents react, or is the awareness that it should be included, climate education, in curriculum, or do parents come up and say, oh, this is a waste of time, they should more focus on chemistry or mathematics or whatever? What is the overall notion within the Czech Republic about climate change issues?
Yeah, I think it's broad spectrum of approaches, speaking about parents, of course. But Well, I think most of parents are open to it or feel importance of it. They are aware that in Czech educational system, environmental education, sustainability education is perceived as a cross-curricular issue, which so it is not a special subject. It is not demand for, I don't know, taking lessons from mathematics or from language, but it's cross-curricular issue which should penetrate through different subjects. So if you use good methodology, you can show that you can develop sustainability awareness or climate awareness, but still you can develop also literacy and numeracy. So I think there were done some surveys, and most I think 70% of Czech public, not just parents, but of Czech public thinks that climate should be issue in education. That there should be more focus on climate in education. To answer it briefly, so it shows some level of support. But if you would go to more to the detail, definitely you would there would be discussions how much and instead of what. And of course, the problem of schools, probably not only in Czech Republic, is that curriculum is overwhelmed by different demands what should be included into curriculum. So it is
but
not
a consensus that it is necessary and that is important to talk about. Mm-hmm. That's good.
Well, and if I mention surveys, this is also some very brief summary of recent surveys done in or research done in Czech Republic. And it's more about content, what's good, what's needed to teach about or on climate. And the research show that the student has some, let's say, general knowledge. Quite big portion of students know about causes of climate change. Many students are aware how the issue developed in past. But on the other hand, there are some white spaces or missing things in these knowledges, like they are not very much aware of concrete adaptation and mitigation measures. And the other thing is that bigger gap even than in knowledges is in other aspects of competencies. So again, they are aware that they can do some simple things like sorting waste or saving energy. But on the other hand, they don't feel powerful that they can influence through these activities something really important. So they don't know too many other options what to do to minimize to prevent climate change or to adapt to climate change, and they also don't feel that they have the power, that they have the influence, which is I will come to it soon, which seems to be the biggest problem probably. And also they have a small chance to share with other, be it their mates or be it adults, about their interests and worries on climate change. And this picture illustrates the main message of these surveys, that on one hand, people in Czech Republic, including students, has, let's say, pro-environmental attitudes. They mostly say that it's necessary to do something for environment. But they speaking about concrete behavior is different. They don't have so much pro-environmental behavior, and the issue probably is that what's missing, what needs to be supported, is something what is called as locus of control. In other words, that they perceive that if they do something, if they behave somehow or do something, that they can really make a change. They really make a contribution. And to some or to big extent, this is true about the sustainability education as such. But there are some specifics of climate education, and what are the specifics is illustrated at this picture. If compared, for example, with issues like I don't know, wastes or water pollution in the country. So climate issues can seem as to be too far and slow problem. They can seem to be too complex and threatening problems, so that we are not able to handle with it. That it doesn't. So the feeling may raise that it doesn't make sense to do something because we cannot change it. It might be also too polarizing problem. I must say that Czech Republic belongs to countries where the skepticism if climate change really exists and if it is really caused by human activities and if it makes sense to do to take some measures. So these doubts or opposition to this in Czech Republic was quite strong in last decades, and I think it's changing, but still we have a lot of climate skeptical views. So it's at several levels, it's polarizing problem where people can have very different views on the issue. And also the last challenge of climate education, that the responsibility is too distributed, that it cannot be solved only on level of individual or community or single state. So again, it's difficult to react. And well, there are some efforts how to answer to the special challenges of climate education, what to do in education, or how to approach to education, and they are illustrated here. So I won't read everything from this. If there will be question, we can go back to this. But for example, we connect climate education with this concept, this methodological approach, which is called place-based education. So we try to show climate issues like something what's not just deal with polar bears or rising oceans or melting glaciers, but that it's issue which is very close connected with every village in Czech Republic, with life of all of us. And through this, we tackle also the missing knowledge of, let's say, Czech population, Czech students, like missing knowledge in these adaptation and possibilities of adaptation and mitigation measures. So working with climate education as a very local and topical issue is one of these answers. The other answer is to enable students to experience that they can really make contribution, that they can really change something, be it something small like planting trees or making reservoir for rainwater. But these practical activities help to avoid this feeling that I can't do something, so support this locus of control. And this is these are principles of climate education as they were expressed in this publication. They react to the previous specific features of climate education, and I just mentioned it. So I think we can go further.
Yeah. And Deary, maybe you have seen that David made it. So that's great. Welcome, David. We talk to you later on, but just we need to be a bit time conscious from now on. Thanks. Thank you.
Yeah. I think I can finish it soon. Just giving one example or two examples. I just will click through this. So there are some recommendations for education policy. So there are some efforts to mainstream, as I already mentioned, climate education also into school curriculum. And we have good occasion because now there is revision of Czech national curriculum. But we have also some some recommendations for teachers. I again illustrated them. We developed some set of goals or educational goals, educational aims, educational outputs for climate education, which educators can use to elaborate them into concrete programs. And we collected these examples of support for educators, different programs, projects, publications which they can enjoy. And these are four quite powerful programs for schools in Czech Republic. What's mentioned at this slide: Eco School, CO2 League, School for Sustainable Living, and Global School or school. So these are examples of initiatives or programs which support schools. In many of them, hundreds of schools are involved. And I had here just one example because my organization is organizing one of these programs, School for Sustainable Living. So this is just in a glance, let's say the size of the program. As I mentioned, it's connected with place-based education. What is our approach? And there are several steps of methodologies which goes from motivation of children and emotional side, connected those personal emotions connected with place through exploring climate issues and the community using some original simulation games on adaptation measures and local impacts of climate measures, a lot of mapping, of course, and critical thinking, critical writing, critical reading. But the result is that students develop a set of suggestions for climate issues in the concrete village, in the concrete community. So they prepare something like local action plan for climate, and they choose one thing which is feasible and with some impact, which is feasible for them to do or to contribute. And they not only choose it, but they plan it and also physically or manually implement it. Again, it was a bit mentioned. And because the last thing I want to mention, because there was already mentioned this IJP project. So we were invited by Polish colleagues, and there is also German organization involved to work on international level. And we use methodology of the School for Sustainable Living in this IJP project. And Polish colleagues has a very similar project, again, based on student initiative and student participation, but they bring other aspects to it, like working with technologies and design thinking. So we hope that these programs, thanks to this cooperation, will be even stronger. So thank you for your attention, and I am ready for questions whenever they will come.
Thank you so much, Drew. That was really a very great insight you gave us on Czech Republic and your collaboration with neighboring countries and even Germany. Yeah, our third speaker, hi David, great to see you, having you with us by now. So we will draw the line immediately, not to lose any more precious time. From the Czech Republic to France, you are located, David, on the campus of Sorbonne in Paris. And great to have you here. Just for our participants, a short introduction of David Wilgenbus. He's the Executive Director at the Office for Climate Education, OCE, an astrophysicist by training. Already the word is so difficult, I can't even imagine what the content would be about. He has worked for 17 years by now as head of educational resources for Lama à la pâte Fondation, and he has coordinated several large-scale educational programs on sustainable development. And this organization has implemented in more than 100,000 classes in France and abroad, new approaches to climate change. And his expertise lies, of course, a lot in science teaching and education for sustainable development. And in particular, he is very much interested, if I'm not mistaken, in pedagogical projects and the design of teacher training. David, before then we open the floor to Shweta because she has got a more multicultural, more global approach. We'd like to focus with you on this idea of sharing knowledge without scaring. How do you achieve that, David?
Yeah, thank you. May I share some slides with you?
Yeah, of course. You're most welcome.
For this nice introduction, and very sorry for being a little bit late.
That happens. You are here. That counts.
Can you see my screen?
Yes, perfectly well. Thank you.
Okay, so yeah, fortunately, I've been able to follow the end of the previous presentation, and I'm very much in line with the recommendation that has been made before. So you will recognize some common statements and advices and so on. So very short introduction of where we are today. Of course, you all know that at the international level, the political context is quite favorable.
I talked about that in the welcome. Yeah.
Okay, so I will go very short on this. So just to be sure that, yeah, this is a very favorable moment to impulse climate action in terms of education. But the problem is that in addition to this political involvement and also the need that has been expressed by the youth that is very strong, and there is a lot of demand to receive some climate education. Despite this favorable situation, we have to acknowledge the fact that in practice, actually, very little is done in the schools. So different studies made by UNESCO last year and some other big networks like the Eco School Network, for example, which is Eco School Network is a network of 60,000 schools worldwide. So in France, we have 3,000 eco schools, but worldwide 60,000 eco schools. And even in this kind of network, where teachers are very much committed to sustainable development education, we have to acknowledge that climate change is really a topic that is very rarely taught at school. Most of the teachers prefer to study other ESD topics like like waste management or biodiversity, etc., because for a lot of reasons actually that we can look at. One of the first reasons is that despite this strong political commitment to promote climate change education, so far there is very little, almost no integration of climate change into the school curricula. So this UNESCO survey last year showed that that basically half of the curricula worldwide include some climate change education, but most often the inclusion of climate change is considered to be very minimal or minimal. So only 2% of the school curricula are considered to focus on a moderate level on climate change. So this is very low. And of course, if there is no integration in the curricula, the teachers cannot have access to resources, to training. They are not supposed to spend a lot of time on this topic if the presence in the curricula is low or completely absent. There are some didactic obstacles, also challenges, as it has been said before, that climate change is a complex subject. It's far more complicated to teach than waste or biodiversity, for example, for a lot of reasons. It deals with large scale in terms of geographic scale, but also in terms of space and time. I mean, large scale and long term, whereas the school approach is much more short, is much more local and short term. So this is there are some conceptual challenges to cope with these long-term issues, these global issues for young for teachers, but also for young students. And actually, yeah, it has been highlighted just before, but when we speak about climate education, actually our purpose is not only to make students aware of climate change and understand the mechanisms or the impacts of climate change, but also to act, to provide some example of action. And so it has to do with also what we could call the active pedagogies, like inquiry-based science education, multidisciplinary approach, or project-based approach. And a lot of teachers are not familiar with this kind of approach also. So there are some conceptual challenges, but also some pedagogical challenges and some systemic challenges, because in link with the curricula, etc. And also some emotional challenges. One of the reasons why teachers also are a bit afraid of teaching climate change is also how to deal with this eco-anxiety problem. We receive a lot of testimonies for teachers saying that I would like to teach climate change, but I'm afraid of scaring my students. So how to do that? So this is today, this is really a set of challenges that explain that despite this very favorable institutional commitment and so on, actually in the class, you've got a very few percentage of classes that are really studying climate change.
David, may I just interrupt with one question? You say the teachers are aware of the issue of climate change. They are afraid of not scaring. What is the perception from the parents? I mean, they, of course, have, I asked the same question to Jerry as well, a say in that of saying, I prefer my daughter, my son to be more educated in mathematics instead of climate change? Or do parents really ask for it? Are they very much in favor of this topic being integrated into the curriculum?
Yeah, as far as we know from the feedback we receive in France, but also worldwide, because we are active in France, in Europe, but also in Latin America, in Africa, and in Southeast Asia, there is quite a large difference between developed and developing countries on this. In Africa or Latin America, it's not a subject anymore. I mean, people, general public and so on, are in favor and in demand for climate education. When it comes to developed countries like we have in Europe, for example, or United States, let's say OECD, we can see that the demand from the youth is very strong, and the demand for the parents also is strong. But what the demand for the parents is not specifically targeted on climate education, but much more on sustainable development education. So there is quite a consensus now. It was not the case a decade ago, actually. We have had some difficulties in implementing climate projects in the schools because of the reactions of the parents and so on. But as far as we know from this moment now, it's not the problem anymore. I mean, there's quite a consensus on this. And even in the teaching community, 15 years ago, when I started working on climate education, most of the time, I used most of my time to convince teachers that climate change was an important subject and has to be taught. And now it's not the case anymore. I mean, all the teachers consider that it is important to teach climate change. So the question is not to convince people that it is important to teach. The purpose now is to give the teachers and the community the tools to teach it. So it's a question of how to do that and not why to do that. So we can see that on this very recent survey that has been conducted among thousands of teachers worldwide by UNESCO, actually almost all the teachers consider that we have to teach climate change, but only 1/3 of these teachers feel able. It does not mean that they are able, but they feel comfortable in explaining the effects of climate change. So there is quite a gap that we have to address here. And for the students, we have this very, very, very problematic situation, which is that most of the students today in France, in Europe, but also in developing countries, expect a catastrophic future. And this is something that is very new. And the reason why they expect a catastrophic future is first climate change, and the second is biodiversity loss. So we have to deal with that. And this is why actually the OCE has been created a few years ago, now 4 years ago. It's a response to the Paris Agreement to put the light on climate education. So we created this center to support teachers so that they can support the young generation in understanding climate change, but also being able to act and to cope with climate change. So the general principles of the way we are working is that we consider the OCE as a go-between between the scientific community and the teaching community. So the OCE is a UNESCO center based in Paris. We are also an IPCC member, so we participate to the deliberation for the IPCC report. We are official reviewers of these IPCC reports. So we are really at integrated into the scientific community. So we work with the science academies, laboratories, and so on. But we really, our target is ministries of education and teachers, basically. So we promote scientific foundation for climate education, but with an interdisciplinary approach. It has been said just before. This approach is very important. And it's not only about understanding the climate sciences, it's also about understanding all the social and the socio-economics and also psychological aspects of climate change. So we promote active pedagogies, inquiry-based education, project-based pedagogy, and everything we produce and we implement is free, open source, accessible, and adapted to local context. So as I said before, the OCE is a UNESCO center, an IPCC observing organization, and we have quite a lot of institutional partnerships in France, but also worldwide. So today we are working with approximately 70 organizations in 30 countries, basically. Our mission is to support both, on one side is to support teachers directly. So we have quite a bottom-up approach on how to work with teachers, school networks, and so on. So basically, we provide teachers with free, open, and what we hope to be high-quality pedagogical resources to teach climate change. But also we develop a lot of professional development opportunities and actions to train the teachers, to support them on the field, and so on. And on the other side, we also work with public policies, ministries of education, ministries of environment, UNESCO, etc., to provide some expertise on the both scientific and pedagogical approach, to implement pilot projects, to work on the school curricula, and so on. So when it comes to resources,
yeah, you have got another 2 minutes, David.
Oh yeah, so maybe I will switch that, but basically I wanted to say that the different kinds of resources that we produce are IPCC based, meaning that each time the IPCC launches a new report, we provide a set of education resources to accompany this kind of report. So summary for teachers of the IPCC report, teachers guidebooks, complete turnkey, ready to use for the class, multimedia animation, videos, and also teacher training protocols for the class.
I saw that on your website that you also invite teachers on seminary summer academies, right? Do some capacity building for them.
Yeah, actually, this is one very important aspect of our action. We spend a lot of efforts on that. So we train teachers, we train teacher trainers, we train inspectors, school inspectors, policymakers, even sometimes Ministry of Education. Last month, I made a teacher training workshop for the Ministry of Education and for the Minister of Education in Mexico, for example. So it's very diverse. And the different kind of workshops we organize are hands-on workshops, face-to-face workshop with a lot of activity, pedagogy, active pedagogies, and so on. But we also organize conferences, distant or face-to-face, field accompaniment, etc., etc. And so far we have trained and supported more than 70,000 teachers in the last 4 years. So this is something that is quite developing, and we also work on how to raise the teacher's voice, let's say, because very often in the community, you've got a lot of policymakers, ministries, UNESCO, etc., explaining to teachers what they have to do. But it's very uncommon to listen to teachers and to say what they have to do. to let them explain what they consider to be important. So this is why we organized Teachers COP. During the last COP in Glasgow, we organized the Teachers COP, and we are organizing a new one for the next COP at the end of this year. So the idea is to make teachers worldwide work on their own recommendation and how to showcase good practices and so on, and to provide the voice of the teachers to the policymakers instead of the opposite. So this is something that is very important to us, is listen to teachers, not only explain to teachers what to do, but also listen to teachers. They have a lot of things to propose. And we organize seminars, conferences, and so on. And just last week, we organized an international seminar on climate education in Paris, but we are doing this kind of thing very, very often. And this summer in July, we organize a European summer school on climate education in Toulouse, in south of France. But yeah, this is very, very often. So far today, we are working in different areas in Europe, but also in Africa.
David,
and
please, we still have Shweta to speak.
Yeah, but I'm done actually. I'm okay. So
Great.
just for you to know that basically we're working with very large.
I'll come up with a question or two later on, but now the floor is open to Shweta.
No problem.
Thanks a lot, David, and for speeding up your presentation. It was really highly appreciated. And anyhow, your presentation will also be available to those who ask for it, right, David?
Yeah, no problem.
Great. Shweta, you have dedicated, I'd say, almost your whole professional life to implement lifelong sustainable and climate positive habits. Your theory, I'd like to say, and surely you have tried to put into practice to address softly and constantly 3 to 11-year-old. So from very early age on, creating not only an awareness, but natural habits that would help mitigate climate change. Give us some insights about the idea of Earth Warriors we're working for, and peer group review, and what could be a great idea to the others tuning in today, and for Jiri and David as well. I'm sorry, normally lady is first, but this time I think you go last is also a very great closing. So floor open to you, Shweta.
Thank you so much. And I will just quickly share my screen. Hopefully you can all see my screen.
Perfectly well, thank you.
Perfect. So thank you for that lovely introduction. I'm Shweta. I am the co-founder of Earth Warriors, actually. And Earth Warriors is an organization that provides climate education resources for young children. And I started Earth Warriors with my co-founder, Kea, about 18 months ago. And before that, as was mentioned, I worked in the education policy sector, worked across the world, in Africa, in India, focusing a lot on working with ministries of education and also on sustainability. So I'm not going to talk a lot about my background, but I'm not going to set the scene in so much in terms of talking about why climate change, why climate education. We all know it's really important, but I will bring in a bit about the UK context and the policy context over there, as well as the need for climate education. So in the UK, there was a survey that was done recently that found that over 77% of children were more anxious about climate change than anything else. And this year, after COP, the UK government actually made an announcement that schools would now have to include climate change as part of their national curriculum. But how schools are going to do this currently is unclear. So an announcement was made, but there's no policy roadmap for it. They've introduced a natural history GCSE, which is much older for 16-year-olds, but nothing for the younger age groups so far. And lastly, they formed a working group where lots of experts from different parts of the country are coming together to determine how climate change should be incorporated into the curriculum at both primary and secondary level. But the kind of broad policy paper that they've come out with has said that climate change, should be part of early childhood, primary and secondary education, just not very clear on how. So that's kind of where they are in terms of the policy context. And there is a scramble now within schools to appoint sustainability leads to make sure that they start incorporating climate change in classrooms. So I think that's the landscape in the UK at the moment, just to give you a brief overview. What's really interesting that we found in the UK was that parents as well as teachers are really supportive of climate education. There are lots of groups that want, lots of groups of parents actually, you'd find lots of communities online that want to encourage climate education. There was a big, I think, representation at COP in Glasgow from parents as well to demand climate action and to demand climate education. So that's been great to see. Teachers themselves, as David mentioned, are demanding climate education. They know their kids are anxious. They know they need to teach about it. But again, researchers found that the majority of teachers are not confident to teach about climate education. So that's again the landscape. And the key stat that I'm going to throw out here, which we found, which came out from some research done by the Brookings Institute last year, was that actually, if just 16% of students start receiving climate education, it can actually reduce carbon emissions. So the exact stat was that if 16% of students in high and middle income countries receive climate education, it can reduce carbon emissions by 19 gigatons by 2050, and that was 50% of the world's carbon emissions in 2019. So the potential for carbon, the potential for climate education to actually lead to a reduction in carbon emissions is huge, and we all stand for it, but obviously not much is being done about it. So I'm just going to quickly run through and talk a little bit about what Earth Warriors does. So like I mentioned, 95% of teachers want to teach it, but don't feel confident to do so. On average, and this coming from an education background myself, I know that teachers spend a lot of time planning outside of teaching time. They've never learned about climate change in school, so they don't feel confident teaching about it. And that's why Kea and I decided to start Earth Warriors, which is a social enterprise. We have developed a comprehensive climate education curriculum for 3 to 11-year-olds that is implemented in schools to teach children about climate change and sustainability in a positive and empowering way that doesn't cause any anxiety. And these are some of our Earth Warriors in the UK. So the way we operate is that we remove all of the burden on teachers. We've created all of these ready-to-use lesson plans that can just, teachers can access it on our online portal, and then they can just deploy it really in their classrooms. We really empower children to take climate action and to build a bond with nature. Again, these are some of our students. And, we really encourage them to, we really want them to believe that they are Earth Warriors. It is possible to take action. Age is not a problem. You can do something about this. And what we found is that instead of being anxious, 100% of children have really embraced their identities as Earth Warriors.
But warrior is a very strong word. Sorry to interrupt. I mean,
yeah. I think we heard that when we started it, but I think it was more in the context of we were placing Earth Warriors like a superhero, right? Like, kids that, so it's much more in the context of we want kids to feel that, they love the ideas of superheroes, right? So we phrase, and if you look at like all of our graphics, so the way we're getting young kids to engage is that you can be a superhero too if you look after your planet and you love your planet, and that's where the
great idea. Yeah. So now it's more understandable why you had chosen this branding.
Exactly, and that's why you see this is the little kid on the left on the slide is Billy. He's wearing a cape, and that was all part of like, I'm an Earth Warrior superhero. These are young kids. We're focusing on 3 to 11-year-olds. So our vision is that the next generation inherits a healthier and a greener planet. And our mission is to tackle the climate crisis by empowering children to take climate action through climate education. We were recognized this year by UNESCO as a Green Citizens Initiative for our innovative approach. We've been supported both by National Geographic and Harvard University in developing all of our resources and getting them out to schools and teachers. So what sets us apart? One of the interesting things is that, you know, there are a lot of organizations across the world that provide standalone climate education resources, but there aren't many comprehensive climate curriculums that actually build on learning year after year, just like you teach like literacy, maths, science. And so at Earth Warriors, we try and do exactly that. And we start from nursery to grade 5. And you can see the only other organization that provides that is Stanford, at least from the research that we've done. I'm whizzing through it because I know we don't have that much time now, but you know, we've made sure that the curriculum is age appropriate.
You have another 5 minutes, so no worries. It's all equal.
So we make sure that the curriculum is age appropriate and scientifically accurate, because both are extremely important. We want to be teaching kids the right thing. Whatever you teach kids has to be age appropriate. So everything has been peer reviewed by our professors. All of our lessons are actually linked to learning standards that are like UK foundational learning standards, US foundational learning standards, because we want schools to know that you can be teaching about climate change and sustainability, but you can also be hitting all of these other skills that you want to, like social emotional learning, motor skill development, literacy, numeracy. And we also tell them how our learning. So for example, what we found is first when we piloted Earth Warriors, you know, it was being implemented in grade 2. We only had Earth Warrior resources till age 7. When those students went to grade 3, they were like, oh, but now what? Are we not learning about Earth Warriors and climate change anymore? And actually, there is that, you know, kids these days are so passionate about the environment and the climate, and like they genuinely want to learn about, you know, things that they can do to protect the planet and understand the concepts. And interestingly, as we were talking about the parent thing, I wanted to mention that what we found is that parents have come back and said that the kids who have been learning or been part of a climate education program actually change their behavior. So kids come home and tell their parents, don't use plastic, let's recycle. And parents have actually been, I know a parent who said, my daughter came back and told me, take shorter showers because, you know, you're wasting water. And, you know, it's just stuff that they've picked up in school, and then parents are forced to make those changes at home, which I thought was a great kind of route to climate action that climate education is actually promoting. Like I mentioned before, research shows that if you just teach the science of climate change, and I think this was referred to earlier as well. If you just teach the science of climate change, it doesn't actually lead to any change. But if you actually teach the science with ways to take action, that is what leads to climate action, and that is what leads to reduction in carbon emissions in the future. And that is something that we have, at least as an organization in our curriculum, really implemented. And I think for us, really figuring out the correct pedagogical approach to teaching about climate change has been extremely important. And also because of that, because we want kids to feel really empowered, at the end, we get kids to a community module to then apply their learnings into a real world context. And also we give them an Earth Warriors badge, just to make them feel like just by learning, they're also making a tangible difference. These are some of our kids. Everything is DIY, sustainable, and actually we're also forming a global community of kids. So for example, this year, because our curriculum is being done by schools in India, UK, US, and Botswana, we then ran a full community program with all of these kids getting to interact with each other and exchange ideas with each other, which was really exciting. And then I will just leave you if we have a minute. I don't know if this will load and play, but I had a little video because I think there's no one better to advocate for climate education than kids themselves. So let's see if this plays. Just gonna give a second. And so I'll just play it for a few seconds, then you can cut it off. I'm going to forward to the part where the kids are talking.
Warriors during the pandemic, asking young children to tackle.
Motivated, and
These are some of the
we're
teachers.
very interested actually in learning, you know, the different things that we do, that, you know, that we are actually doing and harming the planet. They actually didn't know about that.
We should be picking up trash, putting it in the recycling bin instead of the trash bin, because the trash bin will make it go deep into the mud, which can sometimes then fall into the ocean and kill animals.
If something happens to our habitats, the creatures will find it hard to survive. Why do you think this is?
Because they won't have a place to live anymore, and they'll die too.
What have you learned about being an Earth warrior?
To do, but not what to do, to look after the earth. We have learned to protect the earth and don't put rubbish on the floor, and if you put plastic bags in the ocean, turtles mistake them as jellyfish and then eat them, but when they eat them, they get really, really sick. We're becoming Earth warriors!
Anyway, so that's it from my side. I think there's no one better to advocate for them.
Thanks for sharing. I could see enthused faces. That's lovely. Jiri and David and Shweta, thanks a lot so much for your input. Well, we are running over time. Doesn't matter, no problem at all. I think you have all our experts today, Jiri, David, Shweta, have shown that there are so many turnkey educational tools that we could use from the very beginning, like, as you said, nursery school until academic students, and even, of course, for us. And I feel very much encouraged by all the projects and ideas you have, I have to say. And as this forum today, the climate change, is for journalists, I'd like everybody of you, to close this session with, let's say, a takeaway for journalists. Shweta, what should be the role of the media in climate change education? Just a takeaway, a short takeaway, please.
I think it would be great to show media highlighting climate education as an effective tool for climate action. I think a lot of focus in the media tends to be on either things that are gloom and doom or on like very fancy technology and other things, but less on the softer things. And I think it would be great if journalists would, start emphasizing more the important role that climate education can also play.
David, what would be your takeaway to journalists?
I would say that teachers are key for this generalization of climate education and preparedness of the youth. And we have to support teachers by professional development, and we have to put a lot of stress on teacher training, field accompaniment, and communities of practice. They have ideas, but they need support.
And Jiri, what would be your key takeaway, your mission coming from the Czech Republic and from Central Europe? What should be the role of the media in climate education?
Yeah, it's difficult to add something because I agree with what was said, especially, yes, can we hear each other?
Yes, now we can hear you.
Mistake, can you hear me? Yes. Okay, so it's difficult to add something. I definitely agree with what was said, especially by Shweta is the role of education in minimizing climate change and the importance of these soft tools. Maybe what I would add is to stress the role of young people in discussing about their education, in influencing their education, because they bring they bring to the debate the importance of climate issue. So invite them more as co-creator of the curriculum and co-creator of educational programs. That's what I would say. Also with some experience from Youth Environmental Education Congress, which happened this year earlier, and young people had very matured views how the education should look like.
Thank you so much. Thank you to our three experts for this wonderful, great takeaway and for this enriching session. Thank you.